started. All right, I'd like to call to order the Joint Review Board for Thursday, June 28th at 4 p.m. And we'll take roll call. Diana Ellenbecker is here. Chad Weininger.
Here.
John Kasha.
Here.
Bob Matthews.
Here.
Brent Waker.
Here.
All right. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
And there was actually, yep, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Did you want me to repeat the who?
Motion, a second.
Yep, it was
He motioned it, I seconded.
Bob,
Sorry.
Bob and Brent.
Bob and Brent.
Thank you.
And then we have, take a motion to approve the minutes. As you see, there's going to be two in the packet because we actually, previous meeting, forgot to put the minutes in. So we have the minutes from the last two meetings in this packet.
So moved.
Any questions?
Oh, sorry.
Second. I'll
So,
second. We'll just
Brent,
flip it.
Brent, huh?
Yep.
Brent the first, Bob the second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That passes. We'll go on to the regular meeting, regular business portion. What I want to say is I know we gave you some last minute handouts, so I want to just give you a quick overview of what I have. The thickest packet is what was online. This is the agenda, and this is a copy of the Wisconsin Department of Revenue required reporting on an annual basis. So the second year this annual reporting has been required. So that has been included. That has been submitted to the DOR, but we still have the right to, we still have the chance to modify them if needed.
I do like the fact that you added future costs and future revenues on
Yes.
that. That was a nice.
Last year I actually went back to DOR and asked the question, why are you only making me show future
Yeah.
costs and not revenue? I mean, it made them look terrible. So they
Right.
actually added them to the back of the, to the
So
report.
This was there?
This is their report, and it's actually added to the back of their packets, yes.
Oh, really?
They got the printouts, they used to be 5 ugly pages, now it's down to 3 pages.
Huh.
So what I did is then the long sheet, if you see on the
Yep.
legal side, it's all 16 reports just done, summarized as a one-line item. So the same information has been pulled onto this one summary page. What you'll also see is there's a small page that's called TIF Value Limitation Report. That's just from the state Wisconsin Department of Revenue. And we are actually, Green Bay happens to be on the top portion of this page, and it just says with all our active TIDs, we are at 5.2% of our equalized value. A municipality can go up to 12%. So this is just a way of measuring how much is in TIDs. And I think there was one more report. And the one other report is just within each one of the TIDs got charged back an administrative cost, basically allocating some of the costs that were paid by our general operating budget, and it was charged back to the TIDs. This is the spreadsheet. It's kind of an ugly, messy spreadsheet, but this is how we came up with some rationale to charge back the TIDs. So that's just a backup for the administration line on each one of the TIDs. So that's just additional backup.
So from an hours, is that like, is that an activity-based? Is that, or is there some type of tracking, or is that just an allocation?
It's an allocation based on, most of our projects run through our development team. And so on there, you've got the department heads on there, myself, Ms. Ellenbecker, Ms. Chavez, our city attorney, Mr. Grenier, our public works director, mayor, Cheryl Renier-Wig, our assistant director, and then Ms. Jeffries, who's chief of staff. And generally, most of us work through the development team projects. And so in terms of working on the term sheets, working on the development agreements, and then administration of those projects, we're the ones who generally are most hands-on with those. I think in a few other cases, I think it was in TID, where is it? 18, that one required, and this is for 2017, being a newer TID with newer projects coming up, it's time university, was coming through with their finishing up their development agreement with the JBS project. So there's some TIDs that had more time because we were working on more projects at that time. So those are the ones where we spent, literally more time on getting some of those things off the ground. And so that's where we looked at putting those allocations back to those TIDs based on kind of where we spent our time working on different projects. Even though it's an older TID, I mean, TID 5 downtown, I mean, we still spend a ton of time going through different projects in that area or working on projects in that area. So I think that's, reflecting to see some of the higher costs in terms of administratively, come in those like the TIF 5, also TIF 14. I mean, I think it's, again, over the last few years, I've been working on development agreements to move that piece of property. The last few years, I mean, we basically inherited the property, took over the property,
The
sold the
Larsen
property,
Green.
developed the
So
property.
basically, you're kind of just estimating your time. You're not like
We don't have time,
actual
we do not have a timesheet
Yeah.
No.
for these. But
Okay.
I think we can go back and justify that, look, I mean, in this, there's not a lot of projects in TIF 8, so there's not a lot allocated.
But at least you have a mechanism to show what you believe it is.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So those are the reports additional reports that I've handed out. So then the first item on the regular business is to review the Tid Annual Reports. And again, all the details attached behind in the packet, or we can look at the summarized version. Similar report I just handed out last year, but it just kind of went through. The first column is the TIF number, the type of TIF it is. It's just the name on the TIF, the creation date, the mandatory term date, and then the next column is the fund balance, where it was at the beginning of the year. Then it shows you the first 4 pages, 5 columns or so. It shows you the revenues, then it shows your expenditures, and then it shows where the fund balance ended at the end of the year. The future costs are based on cash flow projections that have been pulled together on how much costs are still are either expected, basically they're expected, and then the future revenues. And then that would show you whether or not we think this TID will have a surplus or a deficit by the time it comes down to the mandatory term date. I don't know if you have any specific questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I put in a request to get the developers agreements. Can I still get those?
Yes, so
Okay.
I'm working on pulling.
And I know you have a
Yep.
lot, and I'm not making a big deal. I just want to
Nope.
make sure I still have a chance to get
Yep, which is, look, it's a good exercise for us anyway, just to make sure they're all in a spot. But yes, we can get copies of all the agreements that we've done to date.
Okay. Thanks a lot. It's just the first time that the county's
Yep.
looking at them, so.
Yes, it's numerous, and so we were pulling together. We were both comparing our list to make sure we have the same people on the list, and so we will be
Yeah,
pulling them together.
I know it's big, and some municipalities have quite a bit, and some really don't have any.
Okay.
But I've been reading through all of them. Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
On the, I gotta find it here, the military TIF, I'm not sure what number that is, that's
16.
number 16?
Yep.
So that still looks like that's negative? Is there any,
At this point, this is based on the cash flow that I'm aware of. I know Kevin and I haven't spent a lot of time on this one,
So-
but it's negative, correct, at this point.
and then that one went in a decrement, and then you readjusted the value, and it's still negative? Because I thought that after you would adjust for the decrement, you would have been to a point, or was there just not enough there?
I think, this was before my time, but adjusting the decrement was to keep us, it was in a hole, but because some properties had still come off, it was continuing to go down, and so I think it was a move to
Okay.
stop the bleeding. So you didn't erase the deficit that was there in terms of
But-
I think a lot of the expenses were for the road, the street.
Okay.
Correct. Military.
So you readjusted the value,
I think it was in 2014.
14, so
I think
there
I
hasn't been
readjusted.
enough increment from 14 to positive cash flow on that one then?
Yeah, I'm just pulling
Okay.
up the,
And at this point, I don't, again, I'm the one who helps put the cash flow together, and I don't know of any project in the future right now, so I can't anticipate additional increment.
And then
Doesn't
you
mean
just
it
kinda-
won't happen.
Okay, so you just kind of used it as, okay. So as equalized value goes up and new construction, that should,
Yes, I did, we do take what our total taxes, our increment that we get in now, and we do
Well, you do a
prorate that, and
projection.
we do project it up, but
Okay.
that's not based on any new development at this point, because
Okay.
there were none to be,
hey, just out of curiosity, this isn't, like what, use like a 3-year rolling average or a 5-year rolling average for the value increase?
I am just using a percentage increase, taking last year, the current year's tax increment and taking it plus I think it's 2% increase.
Oh, okay.
I think I think that's what my cash flows are, is 2%. And then if I know of a project coming online, then I will take an estimate of what that additional assessed value will be over the next couple of years, based on development agreements, especially those that have guarantees in the assessed values, because if they don't meet their guarantees, then we would bill them for the additional revenue.
And all the tips moving forward, I mean, those are all pay-as-you-go, right? Is that kind of?
For the
still-
most part, I can explain a little, there's a few upfront costs, and I can go through as we talk about the projects where those are. We've tried to do more pay-as-you-go to balance the risk out with the city. There's a few cases where we do put money up front, but I think it's a better proportion, the money we're putting in, to then the amount that has to be guaranteed or the amount that has to be developed in order to pay the debt service. I just want to follow up quick on your military app question. So when that did get reset in 2014, that balance forward, it still came in at owing $713,000. So because you reset basically the base value, you didn't take away
Yeah.
any net.
But what
values
was,
that were
but what
there.
was the negative there? Because now you're projecting like negative 13.
Negative 13.
Oh, I'm sorry, negative 3 million. It's been a
Six.
long day.
Sorry. Just pulling up when, where that jump is coming from.
Oh, that might
We
have just
have-
been your bonding schedule then? or
Correct.
something?
It starts
okay.
in 2018.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay.
And
I
so
was
that's
just trying
when,
to.
it starts to kick in.
Okay.
I don't know if you have the sheets, the 2010 bonds, principal and expense
That-
start to come in on.
That's okay, that makes sense.
And I think,
I was just curious,
Yep.
I was just trying to figure out what was going on.
I think we also
Sure.
had a development agreement that just started kicking in, either Burlington or
The Broadway Auto.
Broadway Auto. I think that one may have first, part of it just started kicking in 17. And so then there's some agreements that are,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that's pretty minor
they're
in
pretty small.
comparison. Yeah, to
Compared to the
the actual
debt.
bond for the.
Yeah, the
Yep.
infrastructure.
The
Infrastructure.
I know there's a lot of infrastructure in there.
Yes.
Can you talk about number 9, University Heights, because that's the other one that's negative? Just kind of,
Let's see, 54, 57, Highway 54, 57, Tid. And there has just been, I know Kevin will get into it, but we have some, there just has been very little development out there. And we have there's land that's owed, that we own out there.
Correct.
However.
And we've had parties interested, but I think conceptually it's still too far out for some businesses. And they just would rather be around I-43 or closer into this area, even though, when you're on the highway, it's
Right.
really minutes difference. Just conceptually, they don't want to be the first ones in, and we marketed it heavily, but we just can't get takers
Okay.
for out there.
You even lost the gas station.
I don't know if the gas station's in the.
Well, that's outside of Tid.
Yeah.
Okay. So I
I think
drove
it's outside.
past there, I'm like, ooh.
I know, they thought they were starting up again, and no.
I apologize. Were you going to do like a presentation or
So
something?
I'm going to do, as I was going to go through, I know these were the formal reports,
Oh,
the
should
updates.
we, do I have to receive and place on file, or I think I have to have some kind of approval? So I'm gonna take a motion I guess it would be
To
a
accept
motion
the
to accept the reports, to receive and place on file. I think for DOR, I have to have something that the board has reviewed them.
Yeah, everyone's doing a little bit different. so
Okay.
Whatever you want.
I don't know.
Everyone's been receiving place on file.
Receive and place on
So-
file?
Some have been like no action, it's been
just
really
informational, yeah. I don't know if there's a.
There's really no.
It
I
depends
tried-
on-
I
it depends
read-
on who's your corporate counsel or
Okay.
your.
I think, unless you want any changes before, Ms. Elmecker like formally submits these to like DOR
I
and
don't
says
think
these
we're
are
gonna know
reports
enough
for the year,
to change them.
then
Okay.
we're okay.
Well, and the reports are what we're
Right there.
reporting on.
These are truly 2017 actuals. There's nothing I
Right.
can do at this point
Yeah.
to change the
The only thing
actuals.
is you're projected. and-
Correct, and they would be right, your last 2 or 3 columns are really the only thing that we could potentially change, and that's that is a projection of cash flow. So yes, I guess I will still, just so that I have it I will take a motion to receive and place on file the reports.
My turn? I'll also move.
Second.
There you
So
go.
Bob has
We're just trying to
We
make
have the
it
motion
Yeah.
and
Let's keep it the
Brent
same.
a second.
Just
All in
reverse
favor?
it every time.
Yeah, every
Aye.
person every time. You get to adjourn.
That passes. So next item is a staff report on the performance and status of each of the districts governed by the board, and then Kevin's going to give a presentation.
Sure. So I'm just going to kind of breeze through our tax increment districts, things that are going on or not going on in some of these districts, and kind of set up. I think we'll be having another slate of JRV meetings later this summer and this fall, maybe to look at some changes to our TIDs. TID 4, I mean, that's our downtown TID. Most of it's got overlaid with 5. Primarily, this was financing the Alexander Company Apartments, Riverside Place. Those have, I think, all but maybe 1 or 2 converted into condos now, so that's continued to increase in value, and that TID has been, as you see, in good shape. And I think some of the debt service on that is also, or some of the increment is helping to pay with the debt service on Cherry Ramp, which services that facility. Good shape, but no other projects really planned for this TID.
So as you go through
Yep.
these, could you just talk about your close date, your
Sure.
anticipated close date? That
Yep.
might be helpful.
So the anticipated close date in here is, this is open in 98. I mean, it's our oldest, obviously, as you go through in order. Close date is 2025, so that's coming up. One of the things, again, we do use some of the increment here to help pay for Cherry Street Ramp, because this facility uses Cherry Street Ramp, or I mean, in terms of excess, they can't park everybody on site, so they do have parking spaces in Cherry Street. So that's where some of the funding is going.
Just out of curiosity, for the Cherry Street ramp, I know you're doing some development there, or you're trying to do development there.
Correct.
Like the debt service payment on there, is that a couple million, or
On the Cherry Street Ramp.
like how much allocation is going there?
Let me see if I can pull up you.
I'm not sure if I have it.
But otherwise, you know what, don't worry, I know everyone wants to get going, I'll follow up with you guys.
You know what, I was going to say, we can make that a note, that'll be a
No,
follow-up, we
it's-
can
yeah,
follow up on that
I'll,
one.
I'll follow up with you guys, don't
Yep.
worry about it.
I know it's divided between basically TID 4 and TID 5. And then
Oh, so you
parking
are
retired.
split, okay.
Yeah, it is split.
So are the both kids paying the debt service on that?
To my understanding, yes.
Okay,
And
so you don't have to, okay.
Yep, and it is reason 4, because 4 came first and then 5 overlapped pretty much all of 4 with the exception of Riverside Place.
Okay, no, that makes sense, yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. TID 5 is the downtown TID. Again, one of our older TIDs slated to close in 2026. Right now, we're getting online some of the projects that move forward in here, including Metro is fully online right now. Parts of the watermark, as those start to build out, are also getting assessed at a higher rate. Some of these did have money in upfront, and those payments, I think we talked last year, kind of we were in the big dip before we made payments and increment was coming on, but we're starting to see some additional increment come on from those projects. Again, with like little remodels here and there from some of the downtown properties. So it's currently, negative fund balance, but we do see that climb out pretty quickly.
I'm sorry, that's where
Yep.
the watermark is, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep. So the watermark property is actually split in 2. Most of it is in TID 5. There's a small portion where Flats on the Fox are, that is actually in TID 13. But most of it's in 5. TID 7. This is down Marty Avenue, Legends District area. No active projects going currently. Right now, I know it says on here, this was created in 2002, it's slated to close in 2029. Negative fund balance as of 17, but this year it is back positive. Our payments for the Tundra Lodge project have been paid off, so we will start to be generating some positive increment in that area. I know Tundra Lodge at times has discussed some future development. The DeCastro properties have discussed some future development, but we don't have anything inked at this time in terms of a solid project.
What was the other that went in, the 200,000? Do you know?
What's that?
There's 200,000 that went into that.
You skipped over 6, so I was gonna
Oh,
explain.
I'm sorry.
And then the
Yes.
200,000, I can explain to you, last time we met, there are 3 TIDs that we are
Yeah.
going to be closing. 6, 11, and 15 we're going to be closing. And in each case, there was not enough increment to cover all the expenses, so there was an allocation that was done from TID 12 to cover 5, 11, and 13, and 15. That we got approval at the end of end of 17, but it's officially gonna be closing by August of 18. Prior to the end of the year, we allocated enough dollars to make that in a positive position so that it can close, because it couldn't close in a
And that
negative.
came from 12.
Yep, TIF 12, yes, ended up total transferring 700,000 in total. 200 went to TIF 6, and then if you see down, and TIF 11 got 350,
Mhm.
and TIF 15 got 150.
So when's the reality that that donor TIF will close?
I think let Kevin talk about 12, we'll get to 12. How about
Okay.
that?
Perfect.
I know, we're getting there.
He's ready.
No, I was
Yep.
just trying to figure out the 200,000.
Yep,
because
so he actually jumped over 6, so that
Yep, I'm
that is.
sorry. Yep, those are the ones that at JRB last year, we had the allocation amendment for 12.
Yep.
Close those 3, and now just because of timing, those aren't closed actually this year, so that's why they're showing up on 17.
Yep.
It's still there, but next year's meeting, they will not be on there.
Okay.
So those will be gone.
They might be on 18 as they close them out.
Correct.
As expensive, but
Correct.
yes, they're going away.
Yeah, so TID 7, TID 8, Burger Morrow. This was on the east side for some housing development, old industrial park area. It's been doing well, performing. There's no slated projects or future development at this time. But still, one of the things I've talked about, maybe potentially some additional housing. There's still a little vacant land in there. It's potentially a project, but nothing, again, on deck at this time. University Heights, as I discussed, looks like maybe the gas station is in there. It's just been a tough one. I mean, people have been looking for industrial land, but just this has seemed too far out for some. The city really only controls one property out there, about 60 acres. Had clients interested from time to time, but nobody's moved forward with any proposals. We market it, we push it to the private property owners who own land out there. But at this time, we don't have anyone who's been willing to move forward with the deal. Given how industrial development has gone over the last few years, and maybe we'll see that. But again, we don't have anything pending at this time. Tax increment 10, this is Manor Mason, created in 2004, closes in 2031. Originally created, I think, helping with some of the pick and save redevelopment, Planet Fitness, that area. We've had good growth in there, a positive fund balance. Last year we had come online projects, GB Real Estate Investments, took some vacant property and put in the North Shore Bank, the RVs, and Familia Dental. So that did come online, and I think next year we'll start to generate additional increment for this area. There's a small pay-go on there for some environmental work, but most of that increment will go into the TID. 12.
11 closing.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. 11, that's Old Main Street. That was
You're
was
skipping all
slated
the
as.
ones you're closing.
What's that?
You're skipping all the ones
I
you're
know.
closing.
Yeah, that was slated to close in 2032. We closed it early. The fund balance had a minor fund balance. We needed to pay off some future obligations in there, so that's why the allocation was made. This is one where we didn't have a lot of growth, or some of the growth was nonprofit. The school district acquired a number of properties over there after we acquired the TID, which not good from a property tax standpoint, but was good for getting people over there and some stuff in the area. We also, just timing, did take some pieces off for East River Trail, and just didn't put us in a good growth situation. I think that's why we decided to close it last year. If we get a project, in the future, maybe we could look at something in that area again. Actually, I'll be talking a little later about something kind of in the area around Main Street, Whitney Park, but it's potential projects there. But 11 will be closed this year with that allocation amendment. All right, 12. 12 performs quite well. I know last year we talked about closure. It's slated to close in 2032. You know, I think I talked about, I think we are on track to be able to close that early. One of the things I wanted to get
It's
through.
2020, it's 2025.
I'm sorry, 2025.
Yep, yep.
I'm reading one line off here through all
Yep,
these.
yep.
I still think we'll be able to close that early. We don't have all the full infrastructure costs in yet. One of the things that we were doing is expanding Erie Road and expanding the sewer system, which I'll talk about a little bit here about where that's going. But what we did have come in and moving forward is Willow Creek Health, that is Strategic Behavioral Health. Their hospital is now completed. We've done an agreement with them, some pay-go to go back to them. But they're fully online. They hit their target value of 10 million, so they're fully assessed right now. Aurora continues, to redevelop and expand their property. They've been good to work with, and they've continued to invest in this facility and generated additional increment. And then Nature's Way, this is the project I was referring to. This is out the very east end of the business park, Mason Street there on the right, and then Erie Road running across the bottom. Part of the infrastructure, they're underway right now, slated that they should be having some infrastructure done this year, but probably fully assessed 1/1 of 20. Part of the infrastructure cost, we are redoing Erie Road and extending the sewer service into that area by putting in additional pipes to the north. One of the things that we ran into is there, like all east side lands, are a number of wetlands out here. So actually, we had to break the chunk and part of the project into 2 phases. So we are doing phase 1 this year, which gets the road and the sewer basically down to about the middle of this picture, which will be able to service Erie Road. But then we have to wait until next year to do the rest, because we're going through DNR permitting right now to do the rest of the expansion down basically to the line with Bellevue, and then expanding the sewer a little bit further east. One of the things that will allow us to do, and I think we talked a little bit about last year, is expand the business park to the east. And one of the things we talked about is, as this TID comes to a close, using it to basically be able to pay cash for those projects so we don't have to bond for them for the city. And then as we look east, what properties will be part of that expansion of the business district. And then once we get a project, look at potentially a new tax increment district out there. But again, timing would depend on, any project coming forward. But with that, I think last year I talked about shutting that down, 2 or 3 years early. I thought 2021 or 2022. I still think we can hit that target because we're going to have enough increment in there to pay for all the infrastructure improvements.
And like you said, I think you might have said a year earlier last year, but we also thought that the infrastructure was all going to happen in one phase and potential in this 1 year.
It was all going to be done.
Due to the wetlands, that and now it's got split into phase 1 and phase 2, so it really pushed half the project back an additional year. So then part of the increment isn't going to go on, and the expenses aren't going to happen until potentially 19.
Correct.
So that may have pushed back the closure by a year.
Potentially, but so I don't have a full number for you of like the full project cost of what it's going to be.
So you're just gonna work that within the framework of that TID and?
Yeah, yep. And I think that the goal is, again, with that TID, once that infrastructure project is paid for, that we can look at shutting that one down. There's no other, it's pretty much fully built out, and any new projects, in terms of timing, would probably want, to look at something new.
So, this is more of a philosophical thing, but realistically, so you want to prepay and you don't want to bond for it, which is great. That's smart use of money. But, sooner or later, even if you build the infrastructure, you're probably going to have to TIF it anyway, right? So why not just wait and...
Well, part of it, we have to do, we're obligated to do some of this infrastructure for Nature's Way.
Okay.
In order to service them. Initially, one of the earlier projects we talked about, we could have gotten by without it, but because they're a heavy water user, they need the sewer
Oh.
out there.
Okay, that's fair, I was just
Sure.
curious.
TID 13 downtown. This is basically the northern end of downtown, North Pine and Cherry Streets, more or less. This one, again, we have a lot of debt service on this one that we're working on right now in terms of the expenditures, which put us in a negative spot as far as the fund balance. One of the things that we've all been waiting for is this hotel to open, which will put that increment online to help us pay off some of that debt service. That will anticipate to be fully online 1/1 of next year. They'll be opening this fall, which will help not only pay the debt service for that project, but again, help contribute to the TID. Other than that, there's been some small projects, here and there.
Is there, I don't mean to interrupt, so is there still like a guaranteed, I haven't been following all of the stuff, but
Yep.
is there still like guaranteed increment in that project, or is that all gone now?
No, so the development agreement still states that there's a guaranteed increment. I have to look up what that.
Oh, that's fine, I was just
Yep.
kind of curious.
Yep,
Okay.
and that got passed down to the current owner, assumes the development terms and conditions of the development agreement.
Okay, so none of
Yep.
that stuff got.
So your
wiped out.
projection includes Northland in
Yes.
there?
Correct.
Okay, and what happens if Northland doesn't happen?
It will happen. We just met with the general manager.
If it doesn't happen,
today,
we're going to
it-
Packer Bay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it will happen.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Not easier to say that today
It's-
than a
yeah.
year ago.
Oh, yeah, yep.
And WTC will have a new campus location.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, no, this will be
Hotel.
a hotel. We got some other buildings though, if you want to.
Sure Jim would like that.
Tax increment district 14. This is more or less the rail yard, also known as, I'm sorry, skipped, oh no, not
No,
yet.
you're good, you're good.
Still good.
Yep.
Rail yard, also known as Larsen Green. This parcel in and of itself, really we went through a time last year where this property was off the tax rolls for some time, with On Broadway having it, and then when they went into foreclosure, the city acquiring it, and so there wasn't any revenue from it for a few years. We sold the property to DDL last year, so as of 1/1/18, it's back on the tax rolls. With that came a development agreement to work on some additional development. Brett, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you're involved in this, but rehab of those northern buildings, the buildings on the left, RS&T, those are going to turn into office space. Within the far northern building, maybe some options for residential. Putting in the infrastructure, constructing some townhomes to the north, or I guess the eastern portion of the site. And then still probably about at least 10 acres of additional developable land that this group has been working with other multifamily, medical, office type uses, just to really densify this area. With that, the buildings to the right, A, B, C, D, E,
Enough.
E, F. Okay, I just remember how far to go up.
We didn't come up with the creative names.
Are now all pretty much fully built out and leased up. So those should all be hitting rolls in terms of full assessment, if not by 1/1 of this year, by 1/1 of next year.
So who's doing the development on the northern?
So the DDL is doing all the development.
Okay.
So they're the ones who did the development, basically the line in here, Kellogg Street. They're the ones who did all this down here. They're the ones who purchased this from the city.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
That's not going
Oh, it's not coming up
So
in there.
this is
Yeah.
the chamber,
Yeah.
building, all these buildings.
Hammer.
And then there's Titletown. And then this is Kellogg, future Kellogg. And then it goes all the way up to the shelter.
And all the way back.
And then all the way to the tracks,
Yep.
or almost to the
And-
tracks. The
and
railroad's
that
still
whole
ones.
section is, and DDL is?
It's a group of Titletown Brewing and
Okay,
base companies.
okay.
So they've been working, they'll be primarily doing the rehab of the buildings and the condos. We've worked with other groups who may come in and take off a piece of land for additional developments. So really, it will be involving not only DDL, but the city, RDA, other groups that they come in. DDL is really kind of going to be the master developer for the area. They may not own everything at the end of the day, but they're going to be the ones responsible for doing the infrastructure to get the other development going in that
And
area.
then what's the investment from an infrastructure standpoint?
From an infrastructure standpoint, it needs, this will be done by DDL, so the development agreement says that for every $1 million of increment that they create, the city can put in $100,000 that goes towards infrastructure, which includes the street, all the utilities, and the stormwater. So with that, the initial agreement, I think, looked at about 12 million of increment 1.2 worth, just for that first phase of infrastructure, that the developer will be responsible for doing, and then
Right.
turning it over, dedicating it to the city. There's some pay-go after the debt service on that is paid off, but really it's up to the developer to generate projects that are gonna generate the increment for us to pay for the infrastructure. And we felt that was a better balanced model than sometimes just like a business park, you just build everything and then it comes. And instead of this, we're doing it incrementally so it serves the project. I think one of the nice things is that the buildings, our S&T, they're all on Broadway, so they're already served. So it's really like until that stuff in the back
Right,
develops,
developed.
you don't need
Right.
the streets back there. But I think we're on schedule right now to at least put in the extension of Kellogg Street, the new Kellogg Street,
Okay.
and a segment of Donald Driver Way will be under construction this year.
These are great pictures, by the way. Where do you get all of them?
They're just Google Earth.
Are they
right?
really?
Yeah,
Wow,
I know, I wish I had,
wonderful.
a little drone flying
So what
around.
about
but-
on the riverfront? What is the thought on that? That was kind of the thought of the bullfrogs at one time, wasn't it? Or was that area?
Nope.
that
Well,
was-
it might have been before my time. They're further down south in the shipyard
Oh, okay,
area.
gotcha.
Yep.
Sorry.
So that area across is, the green area is mostly Light Park. The area closest to the bridge on the right with the trees, that the city actually owns, and that's Light Park. The piece that's just all grass, the city actually leases
Okay.
from the light company. And that's just leased land right now, but it's used for park functions.
Okay. So that won't be developed down there?
Depends. I mean, I can't say it won't be in
Right.
perpetuity, but I
Yep.
think our lease still goes out at least 10, 15.
Okay.
It's a while yet on that. And so that's one of the things, we've talked about in terms of, with them and how they angle their buildings and heights and what they're going to be looking at. We can say that the chunk, the southern piece is gonna most likely, remain parkland.
Yep.
And today, it's talking about connections to get across. But that northern piece, city's offered to purchase, but they're not interested in selling at this time.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, 15, Old North, Webster, that was one created in 07, 2034, scheduled to close. We did an allocation last year, 150,000 to basically close it out. This is generally the area North Webster to the west. Just things, I think initially it probably was created for some industrial development, and things just never really moved forward in that area. It's a tough neighborhood. I mean, a lot of it's in a floodplain, so it's really tough to rebuild, and a lot of houses actually got taken down. The redevelopment authority acquired some property through tax foreclosures, so some of those came off the tax rolls, and just probably just in timing, things didn't progress as they thought, and so it was in the best interest of the city to close that down. Military Avenue, just talked a little bit about earlier. This is one created in 07, went through the, distressed criteria in 2014, reevaluated, set to close in 2034. With that, we've had some smaller projects, businesses coming in and reinvesting. One of the bigger ones that's starting to move is Green Bay Plaza. A new developer purchased this property last year and just has some good retail anchors in there. Also acquired the Sears property and is looking at some redevelopment plans and also plans to densify the area. As you can see, there's a ton of asphalt that never gets used. So looking at some out parcels, some additional perhaps restaurants or other uses, really to kind of densify this area and bring some additional activity to this corner. Tid 17, North Broadway. This was one created for, what would you call it, like an industrial or semi-industrial redevelopment project. It was done in 2008, set to expire in 2035. I think it was really also to help clean up some blighted property. With that, the project, working with the developer didn't perform per their obligations. So with that, we are in a situation where we have a little bit of a deficit in a fund balance. As far as increment is concerned, there has been some redevelopment on the property. I think it was an old something warehouse was taken down, and some new buildings have gone in its place. So it's done the job of cleaning up the blight. But what was put in its place hasn't met the expectations in terms of increment that was expected. With that, it's small. I think there's like 6 parcels here involved, and pretty much it's what we're going to get. So I think that's one of the things Director Allenbeck and I are going to discuss. Is it worth looking at potentially closing down this one? Just aside, without going into too much, I mean, the developer, in terms of those obligations, we believe we still have a binding case. So whether this TID is open or not, we are still going to see to fulfill those, that the developer fulfills those obligations in terms of a guarantee of that. And I think that can be done regardless of whether the TID is open or not, because they had an agreement to do this, to perform, and they didn't. So either way, I think we'll pursue that remedy. But again, I mean, there's nothing most likely going to happen here. So it may be in our best interest to look at potentially shutting this one down. This is one of our newer ones, University Avenue on the Far East side. This was created really kind of culminating a planning process when we started the redevelopment, brownfields redevelopment study strategy, identified some potential sites for catalytic development, and I think we moved forward with some of those. The first one was University Triangle, reconfiguring that weird traffic intersection that side of town, taking down a lot of white, underused or abandoned spaces, cleaning up a lot of brownfields. I think one of the treats they found are this, like a pile of, I don't know, something like 6,000 tires buried next to the site. I mean, just all sorts of gems cleaning this up. With that, we now have a Festival of Foods, which was fully online the other year. Outdoor or out parcel shops, and the blank spot on the right of here is now Quick Trip, which is fully online. They came online 1/1 of 18.
Yep, right.
So there's still one more parcel in this development. Right to the left, you see that parking lot. That's still slated for future development. They're parking there right now, but there's about 2 acres that could be developed yet to help generate increment in that area. And that one was done as a pay-go, so it's generating the increment we need to help sustain the TID. Other project that's been moving along is Packer Lane Packing. Entered a development agreement last year to basically convert the 30-acre plus meatpacking site, take all the buildings and reconstruct multifamily units out here. When all said and done, probably 320 to 360 apartment units, all market rate. They did have a partnership with UWGB, where it looks like they're going to build 2 off-campus units of student housing, kind of like what they did at NWTC, where they'll be privately held, but really geared towards students from the college. Those are underway right now. They need to be open in August because they plan on putting students in there.
Do you know who's building those?
Delirious. Yep. So TMD Properties is developing this. They partnered with Deliriers, Jim LaPlante to do the design and
Okay.
building this. So
Okay.
they will build and operate, manage these facilities. So that's being done kind of in the left area while the rest of the building's being taken down. In this agreement, we did allow up to 1.5 million up front for environmental work and demolition. That's been drawn out,
Yep.
basically reimbursable expenses. In order to cover that debt service, they basically need to put a unit and a half, or a building and a half online, so with 2 units coming on, that will cover at least that debt service. After that's been paid off, there's a pay-go mechanism after that. But in terms of, when we talk about putting money up front, we don't want to put everything in up front. So I think we've done a better balance of mixing how much goes in, and in this case, just, it's the stuff that's dedicated towards environmental work in here. But they'll have 2 buildings up this year. They had a 5-year phased approach, but I think just the way the apartment market is, they'll probably end up squeezing that down maybe 3 or 4 years.
So in your future revenue, is that just based off of what you have in hand for your projections, or are you betting on the come on some of that 21 million?
That is betting on the come, because
Yep.
Yep, that is based on the development agreement and, yep, the projections. And some of them are guarantees for assessed. So
Correct.
that is based on future.
Okay.
Correct.
But they're firm development agreements that you have, or there's?
Yeah,
Yes.
these are signed and, yes.
Yes.
these
Okay.
are
For this one, this is
So-
a firm agreement.
This one's in
Yep.
place, this
Yep.
one is,
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
I didn't know how much was speculative in that
no,
number.
not.
Yep, no, this one got an agreement last year.
Okay,
So
great,
it's in
perfect.
place, yes.
That's great.
Another project is on the Kaiser site. The developer is looking at about 90 units of market rate apartments back here. This is kind of behind Festival of Foods. They went through process, and again, working with Parks, so we can get some access to Bear Creek there. They may be looking at brick and ground potentially this year, maybe next year moving forward with that site. But that's still in the works, has to get some final approvals, but that could be some additional increment. Again, the multifamily market is very strong, especially out in this area. And so this is another project that could help fill that.
So what's the price point on those? Are those?
I would say comparable to some of the units around it. So I think when you look at, I'm trying to think, I don't want to name numbers that are off, but I know, a number of the properties that like the Tune-ins have out there in terms of some of their rents. I think that's the market they kind of want to
Okay.
compete with.
Okay.
I think JBS was looking at a little higher because they were going after students who, apparently are loaded,
Right.
but also empty nesters. So I think their price points were higher than that. And that's one of the things we looked at in the development agreement too, is that we're not just going to add the same stuff to the market. We need to differentiate ourselves somehow. But these are probably going to look at, some of the comparable properties that are out there.
All right.
Our new TID, TID 19, which is East Mason, East Town, was created to move forward with some development. The old East Town Mall area. Cup Foods is now, I would say 90% online. There's still one small, like 3,000 square foot spot for lease in this building, but PetSmart, Marshalls, and Ross are all in and built out, or were built out as of
As
first of
one
the year. And so this picture will be looking different in the future and much better than the abandoned grocery store that it had been for so many years. And then East Town Mall, we've still been working with them. They've secured, leases for the Petco and the Hobby Lobby, but the right tenant mix for the interior. They've been going with a few different mixes, and of course, once you line one up, you got to get the rest of them up. Hopefully, we can close on those still yet this year. But they're required. There is some potential money for them up front for demolition, but again, that only comes as reimbursable expenses. With that, the development agreement is in place, and it states, I think, by 1/1 of 20, that value.
Is it 18, 15?
I can I'll pull up on the charts. So there are some targeted amounts that they are going to be required to pay taxes on, moving forward. That's one of the things, and I'll just pop out of this for a minute. One of the things I wanted to look at is, when we start looking at, projections for some of these. I've been working with Diana to kind of take some of our spreadsheets and turn them into just more visual ways of looking at these tax increment districts to get a better just like scope of performance. And so I've started with current ones, then I'll work my way back into some of the more tricky ones. But really what I wanted to see is like, can we put all in just one spot, all the potential revenues, which in here are the blue lines, the tax increments, all the potential expenses, which are basically, you know, management things that we do in terms of our administrative chargebacks, our DUR fees, or any, you know, professional services that we charge to the district. With that then, developer incentives, whether that's debt service or pay-go, and then really then, how does this look at the balance of the TID account? And so, you know, one of the things that we're interested in, you know, generally in a TID, when you take out debt service, you go in a hole and then climb back out. Where's that point you climb back out? And I think one of the things we're trying to, you know, balance is making sure, you know, if we look at these districts, you know, what's the path forward? And again, we're early in a TID district, what are the assumptions that we're using? You know, so in this case, you know, looking at, you know, potential revenues. So for East Town Mall, they are slated, they've got to be, all in, I think, 12 million by 2020, and then up to, would be 15 million in 2022. It says in their development agreement in terms of getting the tenants in there and doing that redevelopment. I guess regardless of where those are, where they assess out at, they are guaranteeing payments on that tax amount. So that enables us to pay our debt service, and I think on that one, put in up to 1.5? 2.5. Gotta look at that development agreement again. But that, again, kind of minimizing the spot, and specifically for demolition, remediation expenses, and only done as reimbursement. I think we're just trying to make sure we're protecting us, and if things don't happen, it's not like we've spent money, and that's money hanging out there. So again, pushing back to, you know, some of the pay-go incentives that we're using. But then just, you know, kind of at a glance, and again, we can play around with the assumptions and see where things go, but based on, you know, just these properties, the Cub Foods project, the East Town project, you know, this is how we see it playing out, that, you know, there's a little debt service that goes in if this project moves forward, but then in terms of the TID balance, you know, looking at where that grows, all said and done, by the time the TID ends, there should be around, you know, 3 million in that fund. But then as, you know, you kind of project out, and future boards, you can discuss, okay, does it get to a point where TID's done its function and you can shut it down? So here's some things we'll work on. I know our redevelopment authority has also looked for some ways. At least DOR was better this year because they allowed you to put revenues on there. I think last year's reports just, you know, all you saw was expenses, and it's like, well, what's going to happen here? Where are you getting money from? So this is a way just trying to take some of those reports and put them in just a little graphical form to kind of see, you know, cash flows, and then balance out, you know, your money in versus money out in the future. All right. This. So those are our current districts. Any questions on anything there?
Just this is more of a philosophical thing to it. You know, having close to half a million dollars in administrative services, excluding, you know, the stuff that you normally do for the TIF, the audits and things like that at one time, it's just when you're going to be closing down 3, it looks like potentially 4. I mean, that's actually you're gonna have to shift those costs from the TIF back to the administration. I mean, are you guys like considering that? Because like some like Howard, they don't really have any administrative fees other than what it actually costs to run the TIF, which is the audit and things like that. So they never really have to worry about that. And you have some like Ashwaubenon that almost have kind of your expense and have far fewer TIDs. Yours are a little bit more, I'd say from that standpoint, you're probably in better shape from there. Would you guys look at that as a budgetary concern at all?
Yeah, I think that I was anticipating it's probably about, I think it's 17, or, you know, what we charged this year for administrative costs for those 3 TIDs. Yeah, so that those hours would not be able to be put on the spreadsheet. So yeah, that will be taken into consideration as we do this year's budget.
Yeah, I mean, from the county, of course, our thing would be like, don't put any administrative fees, we want that closed as soon as possible. I mean, I get it from like working at the city that you wanna try to recoup your costs. It's just one of those things where when we get close to levy limits, and I just wanna make sure that's on your radar.
Yep.
Obviously, it is, so.
Yep, that is something we were, actually today I calculated what the three with expenses were that we had charged this year, knowing that wouldn't be available, or we probably wouldn't have those same expenses for the 2018 year.
Yeah. and
But
then
if you create new TIFs, my guess is those dollars just go to new TIFs.
New tips. so you
Potentially,
just-
the hours are just being shifted to another TID or another project.
I know you were.
And in 2020, or 2019, if you shut down the I-43, then you don't have to worry about anything. Life is good for everyone.
Exactly.
So with that, kind of segue to new TIFs. And this is what we've been discussing, proposing for 2018, to set up a schedule of meetings again to go through the process for creating project plans and establishing new tax increment districts for 2, potentially 3 districts. I think one of the things that we look at and learning lessons from past is making TIDs the right size and doing the timing right, so that we don't end up with TIDs that are too big or too small. And also we create TIDs when there are projects in the queue and ready to go, so that when we create it, it's not
Increment.
speculative like build it and they will come. So with that, one of the ones that we're looking at is the area around Whitney Park. Whitney Park, there's the green square in the middle. We have entered development agreements for a few projects, and these are contingent upon, in them they have requests for the GRB to create tax increment districts, or tax increment district that would include them. One is for Whitney School. It's actually 2 separate projects. One is to take the school and turn it into about 20 market rate apartments. And then the other project would be to build 12 market rate townhomes for owner occupancy on the parking lot perimeter of the project. So they would like to use historic tax credits to help finance the renovation of the school. And then the structures that they'll build, they anticipate sales price between $220, $230, maybe pushing $250, which is based on some of the comps and numbers that they've looked at in this area.
You have houses in that area selling for $250?
So that's one of the things they've looked at in terms of, it's kind of hard because there's not a comp yet. You wouldn't buy an existing house there necessarily. So they looked at the Whitney Park townhomes, which are right to the right. Initially, those I think hit the market anywhere between 120 and 150, but they've been reselling for 170, 180.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Oh.
And so they looked at their finishes and grades of
Okay.
what they're going to be putting in there, and they feel pretty good that they could get 220, for those, the 3 bedrooms, covered parking. So I mean, they feel, and actually another phase of Whitney townhomes across the street, just having a term sheet for that. They already have some units kind of pre-sold at that range, like 219. So people want to be in this area, be downtown. For a new housing product, they look at, okay, trade-offs of, okay, we have to get, again, more house in a
Sure.
suburb area, but here I'm close to all the amenities.
And who knows, you might have a big announcement tomorrow, or you'll need the extra housing, who knows?
Never
To
know.
be determined, right? So another housing project would be on some city and RDA owned property. This is right at the curb on Main Street, out in front of Somewhere in Time Antiques. Developer is proposing 20 market rate apartments here, covered parking, and a little bit of retail space on this area. So one of the things that we looked at for this area, and I'll pull up,
Is that gonna include the bus stop?
it does not include the bus stop. That is privately owned right now.
The Greyhound station?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Correct. Yep. So
It's actually kind of a cool building.
it is, and that's one of the things, as you look at drawing the boundary, whether or not that comes in. There's 2 warehouses on the river to the north that maybe we've talked about some potential redevelopment. But for these projects, what we'd look at, and just in terms of estimated revenues, just for these properties alone, there's also the townhouses that I talked about, which are across from Money Square. The city owns a lot of that, so the base value is actually pretty low, like under $1 million for all of this. But what we look at, and again, there's a little lag curve on this. One of the things we need to look at is just, again, getting our arms around some of the management costs in terms of, upfront, there's a lot of development agreements that need to get done for some smaller projects. But all of these projects so far are all pay-go projects. So there's no money in upfront. The thought being that, look, once these start to generate some increment to help pay the admin fees, but then also to use that for amenities in the area, that's what we'll be looking at for part of the project plan for this area. I think this, kind of covers a few of the spots near like the old Main Street district that we closed down, but really focuses on projects that are happening now and real. And with that, like I said, our apartment numbers are really strong, our housing numbers are really strong, so based on that, we see these as kind of the start of maybe another project or two in the next few years for this area.
So do you think you'll come forward next year with this, or that's?
This year.
Okay.
Yep. So looking at one to create one of 18, the other one to create one of 18 would be Green Bay Packaging. And basically this would look at all the parcels that they own and areas around on North Quincy Street, generally in the area of Quincy and then Radisson. Probably heard they're building a new mill. It's going to cost $500+ million.
Right.
And with that, I know Mr. Meininger has been working with them in the county in terms of between the county, the city, the state, putting together an incentive package to get them to stay here and build that new mill here in the city. I think it's really good for all of us in terms of just the investment, the jobs.
No, they're taking one down.
You're gonna take it down, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
state.
Yeah, so they're gonna build.
And they're gonna buy your $220,000 houses around there too. Just drive
They
to
get
work.
good. They pay well. They get good
Want to work.
employees. Want to live
Yeah.
downtown. So you see, this is the old mill here. They're basically going to build where all those trucks are. Build the new mill, and then once the new mill is up and running, they'll shut down and tear down the old mill. So I think it's pretty good. I thought they said maybe only like a 30-day lag where things might get a little quirky, but it's a brand new mill. It's a huge new machine. But that could also help spur some ancillary development at their box plant or some of their other facilities around here. And so we would pull those into a tax increment district. This one, it's a little bit trickier because the state does the assessing and not us, but through some conversations with them, we feel pretty comfortable with the numbers that they're looking at. Base value now, all their property is about $18 million. We feel when all is done, it'll probably come in around 64. Could come up as much as 80, but I think we assumed pretty conservative numbers, and we didn't look at any personal property just because
Right.
the state's been trying to take that away, and it may go away, it probably will go away, but we just didn't anticipate anything there. Our development agreement with packaging is a 90% pay-go. So with that, we feel, I think it protects our risk because we don't know where that assessment's going to come in at. And then the balance of those funds can go into a TID, we're redoing Webster Avenue. If we need some funds to help with traffic or other things, we could use it for some improvements there or around that area. But we feel this is pretty solid one in terms of industrial moving forward to get them to stay here for this development. And then the third, which would be maybe a 2018, more likely probably a 2019, would be here. The shipyard area. So this is where we're looking at where the Bullfrogs had looked at their stadium. They left, But we came forward and just approved earlier this month a different plan for redevelopment of this area, looking at on the southern parcel, multifunction sports facility for basically taking the baseball out of it for soccer, football, rugby, lacrosse, concerts, other amenities, within some additional like waterfront improvements. With that, one of the things we looked at is then, okay, additional development in this area. The city owns all in probably about 20 acres here. And so with that, we want to do the timing right that we're getting close to moving forward with a development of the north side of the parcel. But doing the timing right, we're not going to do it this year or not start the TID this year if we're not going to have an increment until 2019. We're also looking at acquiring Badger sheet metal property as part of this, which is across the street here. We need that for some short-term storage needs, and then long-term, we see that as part of this development as waterfront developments. Also, that piece developing, I think we've got a fair deal on it in terms of close to assessed value for the city, and just for our concerns, controlling the development in the future. But with that, we also don't want to put it into the TID and then buy it and then take it off the tax roll in the year that we do, and create that decrement situation right away. So that's why it may be 18 or 19 for this one. But this is an area that we kind of see extending Broadway further south. I know we have TID 5 in this area, but we can look, in terms of projects that work in TID 5, or in terms of some of the things that we want to do to help pay for some of the funding to build the shipyard itself. We want the increment from future development to go towards paying those project costs. So this is kind of an overview of projects, all the TIDs, where we're at, where we're going, and we'll probably be on the docket later this summer. This year.
Yeah.
Busy.
Exciting.
Very
Yeah,
busy.
it's great.
Yeah.
Any questions? Again, that was a staff report. I'm not sure if we receive and place on file. I'm going to take a motion to receive and place on file.
I'll take it.
Second.
Bob and Brett. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and the next item on the list is set a potential next date, and we can either try setting it here, or we can just let Deanna send it out as we have have the information ready and available to share with you.
Yeah, I think like last time, maybe just do a doodle poll
Yep.
of here's some dates that work and don't work. And like I said, I think we'll probably run it kind of similar like we did last summer, and have the opening meeting where we discuss the proposals. We'll probably dedicate RDA to do the process from the city side, hold a public hearing, and then have our meetings here so we can get our resolutions done by September.
Okay.
All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Brent?
Yeah, you're here.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So
Thank you.
what do you know about this now?
I don't know. Stay tuned. I don't know. Are you going to be there?
I don't know.
I know.